Welcome to Debut, a fusion of storytelling and play. If you don't know what debut is, well, I'm going to tell you. I'm that crazy practitioner of play, where we take three amazing storytellers and they tell a brand new story for you. They've never told it in the public, it's the debut. And then afterwards, we play with the story's direction. But we like to have the interview series where we know a little bit about who's coming on debut, and I am more than excited to bring this next person to debut. She's been gifted by God with performance skills and has been using this talent since she was 8 years old. She's been a full time storyteller for 17 years, maybe even more, traveling throughout the United States and probably beyond, sharing a variety of stories. Whatever fits the moment, as well as doing historical character presentations and Christian monologues. She's traveled all over the country and all over the world at major festivals. This is what's on print. Let me tell you about this teller. This teller has a commanding presence. I've seen her look and say, wow, this story will work. And guess what? It works because she knows the connection between teller, listener, and audience. Whether she's moving us with a spiritual tale or a folk tale or a personal narrative, she does it the only way that she can. Ladies and gentlemen, she is a teller of all tellers. She has been all over the place and beyond, but we're so glad to have my colleague, my friend, and here she is, Shelia Arnold. Welcome,
Hey,
Shelia.
hey, how are you doing? Just
I'm
making sure I
good.
look okay.
I'm good. I'm excited that debut's around the corner and that you're going to be there. Um,
Thank you.
and I know it's been a big day of storytelling for you, and especially with the Women's Storytelling Festival,
Mhm.
Sacred Storytellers with Artists Standing Strong. I mean, if I don't say it enough, thank you for all you do.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
be it humble, be it may, I know it takes a lot of work to do all the stuff that you're
Yes,
doing.
it
But I'll
does.
start with, how did you find story or story find you?
um, the story has always been around me because of my family. My family is very much a storytelling family on both my mother's side and father's side. My mother and father were great storytellers. My mother died in 2014. And my father is still alive, and he's a wonderful storyteller. So, storytelling's always been around my life and around the people around my life, and so doing storytelling and performance came very natural for me. And then by the time I was working at Colonial Williamsburg in the 90s, and then actually getting paid to do storytelling there was just lovely. And yeah, it was just great. And then I left Colonial Williamsburg in 2003 and started doing this full time because I saw a door opening for that, so I opened it.
And you open that door and you stay within story in many different frames. I see you challenging yourself all the time,
Yeah.
and that's the beauty of it. Sometimes some storytellers will, well, let's just say it this way: Shelia Arnold can't be earmarked. She's a wonderful teller for all audiences, traditions, and work.
Thank, thank you. I appreciate that.
No, no worries. I mean it. Um, And so there's a point where you say, "Wow, I can do this full time." How did you get to that point?
Well, I got to that because I was working at Colonial Williamsburg, and my job description changed, and it changed to something that I didn't want to do. But what I did in the job description, my old job description, was bring programming to outside groups, and then we stopped doing that. We stopped taking people outside doing that, and I didn't agree with that decision. And we were getting really good contracts, and I was helping make those contracts happen. And so then people were asking, well, where do we get people to work? Where do we get character interpreters? And where do we get, storytellers? And I realized that I could fill a role. And so I left because I could fill that role.
And that's answering to the call of story. I mean, that's truly what it is.
Mhm.
But not without some trepidation or even some fear and some like, oh my gosh, will this work? Or
Um,
you tell
I,
me.
when I first when, no, when I first left, I didn't really have that. I knew it was what I was supposed to do. I really did feel like not feel like I really knew that God had opened the door and it was time for me to walk out. What I didn't know was the whatever that word is, circuitous route. I like big words, but I never can say them right.
No worries.
But the route that he would take me on to get to where I was going to be telling stories and such like that. And this, okay, let me make sure the camera's good. And so once I left, I had some gigs that were coming up, and a few days after I left my job, Hurricane Isabel hit in Hampton, Virginia,
Goodness.
and that knocked out electricity, and which meant that knocked out the ability to communicate with people for quite some time. And by the time I came back, those things weren't there, and so I had to go work someplace else for a while, and I decided to be a substitute teacher, and I ended up being a long-term sub in a middle school. I didn't realize that what that was doing was giving me teacher cred, and then I was called back by Colonial Williamsburg to come work with their Teacher Institute, which was great. And I was around teachers all the time during the summer and teaching them and sharing with them and sometimes doing a character performance. But they also knew I had been a teacher in the classroom for even as a long term sub. And suddenly it was like, well, can we get you to our school? And I'm like, yeah, sure. And that's really, and once that happened, it was word of mouth. And the work that I did at Colonial Williamsburg led to programming. And then when I left there after 5 years, I think I did Colonial Williamsburg Teacher Institute. And then it was word of mouth from there. So
Excellent. And as a teacher of teachers, once you know the language of teachers, you've got a doorway that you can go in. And
absolutely,
yep,
absolutely.
even though the government changes it every now and then, you have to learn new language and the
Yes,
crazy words.
but you got having the cred is important. Can you come in into discipline? Disciplines in that they hired me literally because they said it was not that I was this incredible teacher. It was that I was an I had incredible teacher classroom management. And that was, they said, and if you have classroom management, you can actually teach. We can help you learn how to teach better. But you have great classroom management. You can't do anything without that. And that classroom management has happened for all the other programs I do as well. So
Well, that's funny because I always said 6 words when I was a high school teacher would bring people together,
uh,
which was let me tell you a story. But
yeah.
on my route, I mean, I kept storytelling and teaching separate
Mm,
until I really started thinking about it. When kids came in and said, "Well, this is British literature," oh, and you could see the fear in their eyes, and then they'd go, "Oh, you're the storytelling teacher," and they'd feel better. And
yes.
honestly, story brings comfort.
Hmm.
Even in the
Hmm.
unknown to the known. And it took me a long time to realize that I need to merge storytelling and teacher. I even wrote
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah. Well, I totally agree. My first long-term sub was for a math teacher. Matter of fact, all my long-term sub was for math teachers. Um, and so this long-term sub for the math teacher, he said, I only have one request from you, and that is please start every day of the class reading a section from this book, which was like The Upside Down House or Magic. I don't know which one of these books it was. And I was like, this is math, but okay, I'll do it because he asked for me to do it. And so I did. And I quickly learned that reading at the beginning of the class helped everything that the kids walked into the classroom with, helped it to get out. And I was reading, and I was like, I hadn't quite put story together with that until I had a sixth grade class. And it was kind of a lower ability level sixth grade group. And that one week they had been so good. They had succeeded in everything that we had gone through. And, that week they'd done really well. And I said, you did so well today that in the day, I'm going to tell you a story. That was on a Friday. And I figured I'd spend the last 15 minutes and tell them a story or two. And they'd go home and we'd get back to work on Monday and no one would know anything. And by Monday, every other teacher knew I was a storyteller. And the kids, and I have no idea how they got, because I was they were the last class of the day. They got home on the bus. I have
Word
no
travels
idea.
fast.
It was fast, really, really fast that I was the storyteller teacher. And then the other teachers were like, hey, we can combine classes. I'll teach if you'll just tell a story at the end. And it literally, I learned that storytelling, but it was because this man had me read apart from a chapter from a book every day and recognizing the power of that. I mean, I knew the power of storytelling, but I didn't understand how you could use it in various places to help in education. And once I learned that, I was like, oh, we can do this. This is just part of the con game. I'm good at the con game.
Hey, there you go. And Tim Freeleaf and a number of people who wrote read aloud handbooks said if you read 10 minutes a day for whatever grade, whatever level, they're
Mhm.
exponentially going to be much, much improved. And it's because
Yeah.
they're learning language, they're connecting community. But I'm preaching to the choir at this point, and has done the. But sometimes someone told me you need to preach to the choir so that they can sing even more.
Oh, amen. Amen. I like that. That's good.
And so the one thing is, I've seen a lot of storytellers, and some storytellers, their only work is on the stage, but your work is beyond the stage, on the stage, and after the stage, and no stage at all.
Yeah.
So tell me some of the places that you have answered the call to story that you didn't think you were going to be there, or just
Mm.
one or two of those times.
Well, I think one of the places I went on mission trips, and went to the evangelistic church that I was at, and I went to go overseas to go on mission trips. And there's a particular, usually kind of a particular thing that you follow that that is uh let's say thing that you follow that the salvation road, as some people say, they call it, and such. And I just never could quite get that. No matter what I did, I couldn't quite get that. But what I could do was I could tell a story, and I could tell a story that was a biblical story and connect it to what life was going on. And that to me was really exciting to be able to do, and unexpected. And then really unexpected when my interpreters wanted to learn how to tell story, and they were just so impressed by the story and how the stories worked. And because they could see that no one was no one was saying no to speaking to me, and they generally didn't in this country, in Malawi either. Usually either any time, but they were particularly interested in what really gather when I started to tell a story, and they wanted to be able to do that. And so then I began to teach them storytelling, our interpreters, and have them, try that out. That was very, 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 very cool. So that's probably been the most exciting thing, which was unexpected, an unexpected place to have that happen.
I love it. I love it. And we're only within the last 10 or 15 years realizing that we're really wired for story. And I've just been doing I never thought I'd be doing brain research or studying, right? But honestly, it is so inherent. The most recent research, Yuri Hassan said that you
Mm,
tell a story in 2 sentences, and if you've told it with the power that influences, the brain of the listener will mirror your brain almost immediately.
mm. Wow.
And just think
I
about
believe that. Mhm,
and that's the power that we hold, but also the humbleness that we hold, because it's a
mhm,
connection between listeners and tellers. Sheila,
mhm.
before I forget, because it's so new, we are on Facebook Live, and I see some people react,
Oh,
and I'll put some
oh goodness.
comments in there, and we're getting some thumbs up, and
Okay.
so I'll keep looking down there.
Okay.
So
So
then we come into the making. One of the reasons I did debut is because when I was 18 years old, it took me. I learned stories on old cassette tapes that said
okay.
the folktailers on it. Said nothing else. Didn't know anything about them. Just what they said, and I would mimic their voices. I'd be out there mimicking Elizabeth Ellis because I didn't know. And it took me a year and a half to find any direction in storytelling, which was hard. And it was so I really think we need to talk about the making process and how we're different as storytellers and learn from each other. And so I'm so thankful for you talking on this interview series. I hope it encourages others. So let's
Thank you.
ask that question. When you're making a story, What is your process? And I know this can vary.
Mm. It definitely varies. So there's, there's the easy process, which this is what I call it, is the easy process is I'm reading a book and I love reading folktale books. I love reading books of folktales. I love to read. So it makes it pretty easy. So when it's easy, I see a story, it immediately resonates with me and I go, I think I want to tell that story. And then I start working on the story and I find my own way with the story. I'll do some research more on the story if more research is required and needed, and where to come from, kind of whatever the background is. That's easy story. And that really for me is the easy process. And I because all is once I can see the story in my head, I can tell it, because that is all I'm doing. All I'm doing, literally all I'm doing, is seeing the whole thing in my head and I'm reporting it out to you as a reporter. It's just that I use a lot more flowery words than most reporters do. But that's it. I'm just trying to transfer to you what I physically, mentally see in my head happening in the story. And that it probably is, and that's the way it is with many personal stories for me as well. I see it, and so I'm telling you what I see. Then there's the more difficult stories where I'm challenged to take a story, and I do this with Adam Booth particularly, but we challenge ourselves to take a particular folktale, usually, or fairy tale, and then revise it, redo it. That takes a lot more time, more research. What I have learned is if I am trying to write something, or something on a theme, something, or trying to create something, then I have to do a lot of research to get to the place where I'm okay. Research, and the more information I drop in my head about something, the story will find its way out of that. And I love the fact that and I love researching, so it's no problem. And I did this with a particular story, which was the version of Shoemaker and the Elves that I did. And I just couldn't find it. I couldn't find the story. I couldn't find how to, readjust it. And I said, well, ask some questions. And so I started asking questions, why did these elves pick this shoemaker? What did the shoemaker, was he always a good shoemaker? Da, da, da. And then I decided to research elves, and so I researched elves and just typed in elves on Google and stayed with it and just read every thing, the next 3 pages worth of elves. And I wrote that down, and then I started to see a story kind of come out of that. And then I searched out shoemaker, and then I searched out German, because this was, kind of a German story that was being told, and German. And then the story, as I put all the research down, I could see the story in there, and I ended up writing that story. So it was really a lot of fun. And at the end of the actual story of the shoemaker and the elves is there, but it's how did we get to that point? So it's kind of a cool. Um, and then the hard story. The hard story is the one that actually comes the quickest. And that's, I've read something, I've seen something, I've heard something, and there's an immediate story. Completely ready, dressed and ready to party. And that's a great day. I mean, it's really great, except it demands to be told very quickly.
Right.
It does not like to wait, which means whatever the first venue is, that's where it's going to be told. So it doesn't matter if I'm going to the National Storytelling Festival as a new voice and the story comes and it says, oh no, this is the place to tell this story right now. And you're like, no, you are a new story. You can't do it. Like, well, I'm going to bother you until you tell it. And that's what's going to happen. And so that's a different process for me. And that's one that requires that I tell in order to find the story, even, to become closer to the story. So it's a very interesting, my 3 different processes. And then I just keep telling. I don't ever write it down. I may write it out. But that's as close as I'll get to writing it. I won't write it down until I've told it about 50 to 100 times.
Oh, I love hearing that. I really do. And I love that you really enjoy research. I remember the late great Sid Lieberman said he was commissioned by Smithsonian to do aviation, and he was in a six-story building of aviation. He said on this, by the time he got to the second floor, he realized one simple thing: he hates planes. He said, though, there was a newspaper article about this big that said the intrepid birdmen of World War II. And he
Mhm.
did this beautiful collection. As you know, he did amazing work. But answering the Pulse's story. Then I also love that you just said, you'll tell it 40 or 50 times before you ever write it down. Because I often, and I always say this, I think we handcuff ourselves. I'm a writing director
Mhm.
when
Mhm.
we put it in print and only work with the words of the print. And I believe we need to word dance in the world that we create in order to move the story where it wants
Mhm.
to go.
Mhm.
And I hear
Yeah.
you echoing that.
Yeah. Very much so. Mhm.
We have people as far as Singapore responding to us, so it's nice to know.
Hey.
And one of the best ways for me, although biased, is through play. And
Okay.
and that really for me moves the story. I believe I
Mhm.
wonder, imagine, and have you considered are the strongest earmarkers for the making and
Mm.
sometimes the telling of the stories.
Yeah.
How is play relative to your work?
Um, well, part of the scary story is all play because it's just there. It comes in its own full thing and it says, "Come on, you're going to tell me." And then once it's out there, then it's like, "Oh, did you see that? Did you see that? Did you hear that? Oh, they laughed on that part. They didn't laugh at all on that part. No, that wasn't going to happen." So it's all, it's all just out there in the and then I think for me, from when I do a story, um, I do it for a while. I'll do the same story for a while. Just I get into a groove of it, and I just start doing it, doing it. I'm gonna take a break from it. Eventually, my soul says, "Take a break," and then when it comes back, and it's like, ooh, getting to know the story. So it's playing a whole nother game the next time we have it, and I'm meeting the characters again and deciding whether I like them or don't like them, or are we really friends or are we not, and kind of checking the story out in a different way. Um, I also like to kind of what if we changed it to a woman, and a story that I've been probably will do this week. Now that I think about it, I could do it
Well,
this week. Is one that it went from being a man story, and it was the concept that it could be a woman that was like, huh, that changes that entire story. That changes where that whole story can go. And so, every now and then playing with it, is there a different animal that you can use? Is there a different, just is there a different voice? Can you have a voice that and with adults. I'm doing an adult program. And I read that and I have them do voices of the animals that are in that wonderful book. And and they tend to do big animals have big voices. Little animals have little voices. And what I do is when I do that, I change the voices of the animals so that the lion is like, "Oh hey, how are you? I'm roaring, roar!" So it's something different to kind of go, okay, didn't expect that, but isn't that what happens sometimes when we hear something and we look at a person, we go, "Oh, they're gonna have that kind of voice," and then they hear them and we're like, "That was not the voice I expected from that body." So
story doesn't
those kind of little
happen in the
things.
ordinary. Story
Mhm.
doesn't
But
happen
I
in the
also will
ordinary.
tell you, Kevin,
Mhm.
that there have been times in my life where playing hasn't always been what I wanted to do.
Do
When
tell.
I have felt like, I know this story, and this usually is when um, I've decided that I know what I'm doing now. And I get that way. I don't know if anybody else gets that way. Every now and then I go, "I know the story. I got the story, and I'm doing the story well. I don't need the extra advice." And so I remember distinctly with Claire Murphy, her giving me some ways to play, and my back went up, and I was like, "Oh, I don't want to do that." And everybody who was in, but all that happened in front of one of my good friends said, "We got to watch the entire thing on your face. The entire process worked on your face as you were trying to decide whether you were going to do this or not do this." And I mean, she made a much better story than just what she helped me to do. But I realized that sometimes sometimes I just want to know it's all done. And that's when and now I understand that. And when I start getting defensive, that's when I need to listen. When I feel that in my soul, like, what are they telling me? That's when I need to listen.
Well, I equate that to a teacher came in once and said, I had this lesson plan completely done and it was amazing. I spent weeks and years or whatever on it until kids arrived. Because audiences can change the story and they are
Mhm.
your baby at one point. That story is like,
Yeah.
I've cradled this. I've given
Mhm.
this life.
Mhm.
I've given this. But JJ Renault said to me once, stories have to die sometimes so others can live.
Yes. Agreed.
But it ain't easy sometimes to let it go.
It ain't easy. And so I look for the feeling. When I start feeling, when I recognize what that is now, I'm like, oop, all right, you're getting defensive. You're getting defensive for no reason, you know? And that's when I need to listen better. I need to be so identify your stuff. That's why I tell people get to know yourself, your stuff that comes up. What does that feel like so that you'll be able to know this is a touch point. You need to do
But
something different.
that is very, very honest. I remember having some tellers come on and they say, "Oh, I don't know anything about play. Kevin, I love you and I'm doing this, but I'm scared to death," or whatever. But to honestly say, there's sometimes that this story isn't ready for the play, or I'm not ready to play with that story would be better.
Yes,
And
I think that's the better one. I'm not ready to play. But sometimes being not ready to play doesn't mean you shouldn't. It just means that you might not be ready to play, but the story might need some play in it.
well, let me throw that back a little bit. As the coach or the
Okay.
play, the mediator, there are some times that I'm like, do I really want to go this way with, Ed Stivender or whoever, or whoever? It doesn't matter. And most of the time, because we graciously give, and I'm serving the story and the teller,
Mhm.
it works. Or if it doesn't work, we go to somewhere new. That's the
Yeah.
cool thing about play. It's not a rehearsal for life. It's where
Mhm.
we recharge and re-see and rethink, and we're in the moment. And we don't do that enough,
Yeah.
and sometimes we do it on stage, and sometimes. But as you said when you were talking about working with Adam, I mean, there's people that you just, answer a challenge to. Let's work with Rapunzel and see where it is. I mean, I've heard storytellers say, "I hate this story. That's why I wanted to work on it."
Mm,
And it's
mm.
not
I
room for
love it when somebody says they hate a story and then but they say, I hate a story, but you made it different. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's cool.
when I didn't like Rapunzel story, and I needed to read more, but I heard it in rap by Amber Sidari. Uh,
Oh,
was just brilliant, and
oh,
it
I would love to hear her do that. That would be awesome.
so we see that. Well, what challenges you next within the context of your story journey? Not the
What do you
immediate,
mean?
like what do you want to challenge yourself to do? Let's say within the next couple of years that you haven't done with storytelling, and it doesn't have to be defended,
Well,
obviously.
it really is, and may sound strange. What I am feeling right now is I have a ton of new stories. For me, the pandemic was nothing but a creative just juices on steroids. I had more new stories. I have more new stories than I have had in a forever amount of time. So I have tons of new stories, which means I've been telling a lot of new stories, but I haven't had a lot of time with them. What I'd really like to do in the next year is really spend time tightening some of the stories, getting a chance to do some of the research with some of the stories, um, make sure that get some outlines on some of the stories just so make sure I have outlines. That's what I really would like to do. I'd really like, rather than finding new stories right now or new places to tell stories, I have lots of places to tell stories. I'm very fortunate in that. It's a great thing to be able to have that. Now I really want to tighten some of my stories and, check on them and make sure I'm using particularly the things that have been new. Because I think I've written some things so fast and they've come so quick. that I haven't had time to really go, oh, this doesn't work and this does work, or what is the word? I remember having telling a story and I could not remember what the word was for a Muslim woman covering her head. And I'm like, I know this word. I could not remember it. It could not come out of my mouth. I couldn't remember it. So literally, when I was in school the other day and I met a young Muslim girl in the school, and I said, "Excuse me, I'm so sorry for asking this, but I really need to know because I've forgotten
Sure.
what is it they're called." She said the hajib, and I said, and I, I just threw up my hands because, like, of course that's the name of it, but I couldn't remember it, and I was like, because it's not planted in the story right now, and so I need to really, I need to give some ground and some time to some of these really wonderful news stories that I've done. I like my stories right now. They're awesome. They're coming from
I,
really good places. Um,
and
but I need time with them.
well, first let me share some praise from a debuter of Joey Talbert here. Uh, she said she saw you at the Women's Festival and you're one busy woman, but I'm sure it was amazing. And
Oh,
but the other thing is, you recently got to calm down or be busy in kind of a retreat. What did that feel like?
well, one, it's not a retreat. I keep telling this to people because I want us to get our wording really correct for
Please,
this.
please, I
So this
appreciate
was it was an artist residency, and I was selected to be at McDowell and as a McDowell Fellow in Peterborough, New Hampshire. At McDowell is a place for artist residencies and things, and it was amazing. It was absolutely absolutely necessary for my. It was necessary, it became necessary being able to have the opportunity to do that, and it actually was, I was I didn't realize how much rest I needed, how much I had not processed the pandemic. And for me, the pandemic turned into artists standing strong together, and
it.
that's what it was.
1,000 claps for that.
Well, thank you so much. But it also meant I didn't process any of the losses that I had, and not of people. I didn't have really losses of people. I had loss of programs and changes of life and loss of the regular, ordinary parts of my, loss of my um, lots of relationships that I couldn't talk to people, And then once I got into Artists Standing Strong Together, I was talking less to people that weren't in the storytelling community, because all my time was being spent with that. So it was a rest, and it was also working on a great new project that I loved. And then the most important part of that for me, Kevin, was well, two. One is meeting other artists in other disciplines and recognizing that when they heard story being told, when they heard storytelling, they recognized and spoke it out how much it was missing from other disciplines and how much it needed to be around. So that was very, very huge for me. And then understanding how much self-reflection and not just self-care, but for Sheila's world, I needed to have times of sitting and and just to sit and reflect and to think. And I had the opportunity to do that there and be able to create a plan and kind of know where I'm going, in certain ways to 2025. I was really happy about that. That wasn't the plan when I went there, but it helped me to know where I am at. And I strongly, strongly, strongly encourage if you if you want to know what it feels like to have the time and in some cases the money, not always can people pay you to go to these things. And I was not paid to go there, but I was given 3 meals a day, a wonderful room, an artist studio, and time, which is just extraordinary. And I didn't have to pay for any of those things that I was given. You can do create incredible work. And so I encourage people to go to www.artistcommunities.org and look at the directory that's there. Look at Capital, Creative Capital, and what comes out from them, and begin to look at where you can take storytelling and let us make storytelling, put storytelling into the mainstream as a discipline, as an arts discipline. Right now, it's not because no,
Well, I think those things are going to change. And
honestly, because we've been talking to the same audience.
we missed that last sentence, Sheila. There was
Oh,
some.
okay. I was saying that I think that we that we need to because so that we can be seen in the mainstream of disciplines, and we haven't done that, and we haven't gone to the places that need to know that we exist. So let's do that.
Well, for those who don't know, Sheila and Donna Washington are the co-founders of Artists Standing Strong Together. And I just want to take a moment and thank them because what they did is they provided not only a place for storytellers, but landscapes to see story differently in different venues and different avenues and in different connections with those artists that she's speaking. So if you don't know about that, you definitely need to check it out. But she really did give us new pulse, new breath in the storytelling world when we thought we weren't breathing very much. I mean,
Thank
let-
you. And so that's www.artist, that's with the S, standingstrongtogether.net. Okay, I've done my pitch.
and we all need to pitch it. We all need to have that networking community. And that's part of what debut debut is as
Mhm.
well. It's a place where I can hear voices I haven't heard before, voices that I have, but in venues that maybe they're not used to because we're not necessarily performing. The story is because you want to tell it. That's the difference.
Yeah,
And then the play
amen.
is just a sharing between you and I. Um,
Okay, I have to remember what I just told you I was gonna tell you. Now I forgot what I said I was gonna
you,
tell
you
you.
were
I had
working
it in
on.
my head and then it disappeared.
It'll
Ooh,
be on
okay.
Facebook Live. You could watch it.
Okay, I'll have to watch it and remember that moment again.
Sheila, why debut? I should ask that.
Because Kevin Cordy asked me.
I understand, and I appreciate
But it says a lot of things when I say that. I trust you, Kevin. I trust the work you do is how you help people process, and that's been good. And you've been a good friend, and that's been awesome. So when I have the time to be able to say yes, I can say yes to a friend, and that's cool.
well, thank you so much, so much. I'm going to do a little commercial for us if I can
Good.
figure it all out. First of all, we need to see Sheila Arnold at debut Sunday, 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, March 27th. Brand new story. She's told you a little bit about it already. You can also see other tellers, and maybe if I can. There we go. We can see Kristen Ward and True Thomas. I don't know if you know the
Yeah.
Sheila, but the other thing is once you're on debut, you're part of the family. So
Amen. Good. 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 Good.
and
Good. Good. Good.
and it's just nice to see that kind of combination come together.
Mhm.
And Sheila, we could talk forever, and I know we can, and we have before. But Sheila Arnold, I'm giving you the last word.
The last word. What would the last word be? Stories are absolutely needed. They're necessary. Today, I was talking with Noah Baum, and we are talking about sacred stories. And she related something she had read that the things in cultures, old cultures, the things that became sacred were things that were necessary.
Mhm.
Stories are necessary. They are a sacred and unsacred, if we want to use that word with it. But we need to find and tell stories, stories that are old and have great wisdom from the past, our own personal stories, historical stories. We need to tell stories. How else can we begin a conversation without stories? We need them very much in a time of peace. And we definitively need them in a time of war, time of division, and a time of unity. So let's go tell some stories. How about that?